with Lara Höbling and Joanna McCalmont. Sorry, Joanna, sorry for. And I was just saying before earlier that I shouldn't be here. I'm used to be behind the scenes, not in front of a cam. So please do excuse my English and my fumbling sometimes. And Duncan today has some technical problems, so I will go straight away with introducing our speakers. And Lara asked me not to be too formal in introducing her, and so I won't. But first, I will introduce myself. They asked to introduce myself. I've been a literary translator for 35 years now, and an audiovisual translator for 15 years. And for 15 years as well, I've been teaching and tutoring literary translators. And Lara, she's from Croatia, and she's a literary translator, an audiovisual translator as well. And how long have you been a literary translator, Lara?
Literary translator since I was 17.
Okay, fine.
But formally since 98.
Okay, fine. And she's been translating, she's a translator from English and German. And she's also a lexicographer as well. Yeah, right? You wrote a dictionary, my first dictionary, Croatian dictionary for children and young and adults, right? And but she's here mostly because she's the general secretary of CEATEL, which is the Council of European Literary Translators Association, and she's a member of the Croatian Literary Translator Association, right? Because of course the focus today, or the panel today, is on Literary Translators Association. And Joanna, she's a young emerging literary translator. She's been studying literary translation and interpreting, right? Both in UK, she's from Northern Ireland, and she studied both in UK and in the States, if I remember well, right, Joanna? I don't know.
No, I've been published in the States.
Okay, sorry. And she's now, actually, she lives in Brussels, where she works as a in-house translator and interpreter for accredited agencies with European institutions. And she's been really recently published for the first time with an illustrated novel or something like that, right? But she's very excited about that, and Lara and me just told that to put away the books she will get as soon as she get the book translated and published, and she's going to be published for the first time. Her first long novel will be published in 2023, right? April. And she's a translator for French and German as well, but she speaks also a very good Italian, and because well, she's a polyglot. As Lara, because she reproached me saying that in ex-Austro-Hungarian countries, they are all polyglot, of course. So I was just telling, I attended the second edition of this summer school, and it was quite an impressive time for me, because I just started back then. It was 2017 to teach literary translation. And so I thought, well, maybe I should kind of get some theoretical basis on what I'm doing, because of course I started teaching translation as a translator. I never studied teaching translation. I never studied tutoring translation. And as so often happens when I attend this kind of, let's say, technical, academical meetings or congresses, which I see that mostly one of the most important points for me, which is kind of overlooked, not taken in so deep consideration, is about the professional life of translation. Students, future translators, are taught how to cope with the technicalities of the translation, but I see that they quite never introduce in what real translator life means, in what they are expected, what is expecting them and what they should expect from their life as a professional translator. And of course, I have to say that in the same year, no, sorry, in 2018, I attended a very interesting congress in Vienna about translator studies, which was kind of opening a wide range of horizons for me. And since then, when I teach translation, when I am in classes, part of my classes are dedicated exactly to this. What a translator after having studied translation, after having immersed himself in translation studies, has to face when it's confronted with the reality of the working world. And in this, of course, comes the association, and that's why we are here today. We are representing the Association of Literary Translation. I am the chairman of the regional section of my national literary translation, one of the Italian National Literary Translation Association, which is AIT, Associazione Italiana Traduttori e Interpreti. Lara, she's a representative of the Croatian Literary Translator Association, and as I said before, the general secretary of a council of most of European Literary Translator Association. And Joanna, she's here because she represents the board, the council of which was when I came to know about them, it was kind of the Managing Translators Network, because it's that's what I wanted to, when we invited Joanna and Lara, to have two of point of views. The point of view of a seasoned, sorry Lara for the adjective, literary translator, and the point of view of an emerging literary translator, to see what a seasoned, experienced literary translator, Joanna, Lara, just as I do, is a teacher as well. She tutors literary translators and students. What we should teach our students about what they are going to face once they are thrown in the professional world, and what effectively, in reality, emerging translators do expect or do attend or do think they will and how they face these kind of issues. So I'll let first, of course, I'll give the word. Lara will speak first, and then I'll let. In the meanwhile, if you have any question, please do use the question and reply and answer button you have on Zoom, or use the chat room. And if there is any question that I have to put immediately to our relators, I will. Otherwise, we will have a 15-20 minutes in the end where we can answer your questions. Okay. So, Lara, the scene is yours.
Thank you. Thank you for this nice introduction, and I am sure that if judging by Ross's keynote speech, I'm sure that the participants of the ESLT have heard millions of information until now. So I won't be giving you detailed PowerPoints and stuff like that to burden you even more. I just wanted to really stress the importance of teaching professional life before we launch the students into this professional life. Just the way that you would teach a child when it starts school to look left and right. Here we have, from the left coming tax laws and regulations, and from the right we have copyright and working conditions coming at us. And usually students don't know anything about that. There are very rarely some teachers who mention authors' rights or copyright, but never have they ever learned anything about, for example, the Croatian tax system. That is also the reason why they don't really understand the importance of becoming member of an association. Because they don't realize that the most stress they will have in work is actually with working conditions and with authors' rights and with tax regulation, stuff like that, not with the translation itself, because they have probably been to various workshops, they have seen what is expected of them, they have been taught well, mostly, especially, you know, we've seen the Petra E framework. If you have accomplished all these levels and tasks, you are probably quite ready to start as a, you know, emerging literary translator. Of course, you will need help from professionals in your work, from editors, from copy editors, from various people in the chain. But you do have a strong basis. What is really lacking is this part, which we call the professional life, because you can, you know, dabble in literary translation out of, you know, love for literature as much as you like. You don't have to be published. But once you are starting your discussions with publishers, with agents, you have to be aware that every country has a different situation, that your country might not be the worst, you know, or the best. It's very good to see how your neighboring countries solve things. This is why in Seattle we have tried to gather information. So our main job is actually gathering information and giving other associations and their members as much information as we can find. The thing is that Seattle is not only representing associations. We are, through these associations, we are representing about, you know, 10,000 literary translators all around Europe. And that's a huge number when you think of it. It's really a mass of information that's gathered. For example, if you look at Ross's keynote speech, she has enumerated so many activities, and she has spoken only about one country. You can multiply that with 36 of our member associations, and you will really get a lot of information that you cannot get if you don't understand the importance of becoming member of an association and exchanging information with other colleagues. It does not mean that you have to, you know, become less shy or less of an introvert, which probably, you know, it is, well, maybe it's a cliche, but many literary translators actually don't really like all that mingling and talking to other people. They really like their computers and their translations, but still there could be a golden middle, as we say in Croatian, between the two poles. You don't have to be always out there, and you don't have to be an activist, but you can at least be informed. So what I wanted to show you, I will now share my screen. I hope the right one. I hope you are now seeing the main page of the Seattle of European Council of Literary Translators Associations, as you can see. And we have several buttons on this page. One of them is news. which is something that every translator should be aware of. Are you seeing the right screen? Are you now seeing the news?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Because I can't see it. So if you go to the news section, you will find information about, for example, grants for translation and publication, which is something that you really need as an emerging translator, especially because this is one of the ways you can travel, although you haven't really started earning from your profession yet. The other button that we have is a very important one, which is the button that leads to our ease-in counterpoint, which also gives you lots of information about not only, you can see here, can literary translation be taught by Ross Schwartz? So it's not only about the content of literary translation, but also the form, as I like to call it, i.e. the professional life, the working conditions. You can also read about human rights. This is issue number 7. You can download it from here, and there is an archive of past issues, and you can subscribe to Counterpoint here. This is a very important and very interesting survey that we have conducted last year. And I think that it would be good for every translator, not only emerging translators, to read this and to see where their country is on the European map and how important it would be for them to become more active and try to improve certain conditions, or actually sometimes it's just nice to see that your conditions are not the worst. So maybe it could be also therapeutic to look at this. But what I wanted to stress today is the title companion for Literary Translators Associations. It does say for Literary Translators Associations, but individual members could also benefit from reading about various, this is actually a page that emerged from our best practices working group. So what you will find here are also stories about successful activities that some of our associations have conducted. So if you are wondering why you should join an association, here is a button for you, which says recruiting and motivating members. And here you can find stories. For example, this is a very interesting one, why be a member, from Poland, and you can look at these videos which give you certain opinions by here are 2 translators. One of them is also a TEATL delegate here, Rafał Wyszowski. And they explain why they think it would be good to become a member and why it's good to associate with colleagues. There are certain other points that I would like to make later on, but I would like to hear Johanna about this emerging translators association that they are doing, and because I think that it's a natural progression from all these problems that I have enumerated, that the natural progression is actually to start speaking to your colleagues. So Johanna, if you could continue.
Yeah, let me just, I've got a couple of slides more to remind me what, what to say. So I'll just share these. I think you should be able to see them. Yes. Can you see slides now? Great. Oh, hang on. Yeah, I think, oh, Leonardo's on mute. Yes, so I'm here to represent the Emerging Translators Network. And I think I see a couple of the names in the attendees there. So lovely to have some company. So I'll just tell you how it started. It first launched as a Google group in 2011 by a group of UK-based translators who are at the BCLT Summer School. So we know Duncan as well. And I think they wanted to stay in touch, as far as I've understood, because this predates my involvement. And so currently there are 1,552 members when I checked last night on the Google group. And I think they range sort of widely in their kind of experience. Some have graduated with degrees very, very recently. Others have been out there for a while. Some haven't studied languages or translation formally, but they have the language skills and passion. So it's very varied. We do have people across the world now as well. And the main aim is to have a support network for early career literary translators working primarily into English. And it's a kind of stepping stone, as it were, to the Growing Up Translators Association in the UK Society of Authors. And because it was initially started in the UK, the main focus is perhaps still the UK publishing market. But as you know, English, we've got various different countries, continents involved. So gradually people are getting more and more experience because the world is more interconnected nowadays. And yeah, as I said, so mostly it was the Google thread, and I think they met up in London from time to time. There was a desk at the London Book Fair a few years ago as well, which was a good contact point for people to find out about starting out. And then last year in 2021, Joseph van der Voort was the admin. So the admin used to basically check the email inbox and add people. And he wanted to hand on the baton, and half a dozen of us actually volunteered. So we have set up what, you know, sounds quite grand. It's a committee, but it's just a sort of a group of people who can share the checking of the inbox. So Sean and Maxine, they're busy with the inbox and adding people. Sean's also great with the sort of graphics and so on. So he created us a nice logo that we can use, which is sort of helping people recognize us. Twitter is also where a lot of people get information and connect. So we started a Twitter account last summer. And then because Zoom kind of became a very comfortable place to meet, we started to have online meetups. So it's interesting that Laura says translators don't often like to talk, but what we find is perhaps sort of with the pandemic, there was this eagerness in a way, just to sort of even see a few faces. So that worked quite well. That was one of the nice things to have happened amongst the less nice things past couple of years. And we have invited some guests, and after we started a few just general breakout small rooms, then we started to invite a couple of guests. So we see that there are members involved in other things like the European Literature Network or New Books in German, or have been mentored by the National Centre for Writing. So we've invited them to come and speak to us. And actually, I think some of the feedback afterwards is like, oh, you were able to do that. You haven't been established for 50 years. You're not, part of the London scene, but you've actually got involved. So I think that encourages people just to see their peers do something. And because you're the peers, it's easier to ask questions. And then just this year, we've launched a blog, and actually I think our two editors are there, Fiona and Helen, I think they're there. So it's great to have a few people to think what is helpful. So the idea of the blog is that we'll have some articles where people share things that they learned or how they got published, or even just to describe what an event was like. The first blog post was about a wonderful event Amanda organised in London in cooperation with the Goethe Institute. So that hopefully will just broaden the network to even people who might be afraid to ask to join our Google group. So this is on our website as well, and joining is really it's a very low threshold for joining. It's free because it's all, it's a discussion group, but people just need to show that somehow they're interested in translation. So they'll just email the Gmail account and then tell us what languages they know, and then they're added, and then they're free just to post and ask questions. And yeah, Lara, it's really important to have a space where you can ask, how much can I be paid? Or I've been offered this job, what should the deadline be? Or have you heard of this publisher? People share deadlines for competitions, for magazines that are accepting translations. And people also share information about events. Maybe they'll say, I'm going to London Book Fair, who's going? And actually London Book Fair, that's one where then quite often someone will volunteer to organise a social event afterwards at some point. And it's also nice as well, it's a space for people to go, hello, I've published this little article, or this is my first book. So then you can kind of celebrate, we call them toots. So you're kind of, you know, it's a nice place where you know others will be very excited and they understand that it wasn't easy to get there. So that's the kind of atmosphere. And then I just wanted to share a couple of things that the members have said. I asked recently, you know, have you got a success story? And Marinella told us that for her, because she hadn't studied, she had the languages, she had the interest, and she found this space where she could connect with colleagues online, in person, ask questions. And she's a really nice story. It was a lovely long email, so just a short quote. And then last week on Twitter, actually, a couple of people quote tweeted our tweet, join the group, just saying that's how they got their first book, Kat and Nikki. So that's on the internet, so I'm not sharing anything that I don't think they want to share. So it's nice, you know, they both got their book, their first books, and they can ask questions. As Kat says, you can search the group before you ask a question, because there's more than 10 years worth of discussions there. And yeah, it's really very helpful, and it's just nice to maybe meet up with people that you will then ask to read your work as well. That's sort of, I think, a valuable thing about these kind of networks, because to reach out to more experienced translators, it's, you know, a bit daunting. But and I should say the UK Society of Authors and Translators Association, they're very welcoming, I think, as well, and they've created an associate membership. And many of the people who have been in ETN, who founded it there, you know, they've been chairs of the TA and so on. So there's, you see the progression, there's still the history.
And in fact, there is a comment by, sorry, it's just, there's not the name, but it's ATN is an amazing place where fellow translators share doubts, offer questions, whatever worries us and joys too. All members are very supportive. I also got my first book translated thanks to ATN's colleague.
Oh, that's great to hear.
Maka wrote it.
Excellent, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. So that is a confirmation. And I wanted to start from a point where Lara just pointed out while showing us the CEATL webpage about the surveys, which sometimes that is something most of our colleagues think that, well, what's that? What are they worth for? I mean, surveys. Do we need literary translator a survey about our legal condition, market condition? If we know. We don't know if it is about our country, it's fine, but why in Europe? And so I want to show something, because what I wanted to add to what I said in the beginning, it is, for example, in Italy, at least in Italy, university and school forming translators start to understand that the professional take on the profession, is important. So they're starting to give lectures to students about what they call our professionals, from Translators Association, me from AIT. In Italy, we got also Strade or Aniti. They call representative from those associations to talk to their students. And I want to show, if you mind, just to show how I use, for example, a survey conducted by CEATL to help my students to understand how to face their work condition. And this is a short course I delivered to the University of Turin, here in Turin. I'll show you, I'll try to as well if I can. I'm good at sharing it. Let me see. Okay. Can you see it now? Yes, okay. Yes. This is the, of course, it was the last edition. And for example, it's a long, it's kind of 4 hours, all the issues. But what I wanted to show you was about the, as you say, the surveys. Because, for example, I start from a survey about the fee, about the payment, the fees in Europe, which is one of the latest surveys conducted by CEATL and published right this year. So as Lara was saying, an emergency translator can say, because sometimes the emergency translator is offered a book to translate and they think, oh, great, I got a book. But they don't know whether the offer, what they offer to him or to her, to them, is a right, an equal price for that. And comparing the different levels of prices and fees in Europe can help them to understand. And then the next slide I show them is what I call penny pinching the profession. And there, when you go, sorry, it is in Italian. Of course, I never thought of translating that in English or in any other language. The penny pinch, when I penny pinch our profession, they can see what they really get after working on a page, which is important. So I start from the middle range of the fee in Italy, and in the end you get half that. Okay, which is important because sometimes the students don't understand, don't know that. They think, okay, I'll get that at the end of the work. I get that for pages, for cartella, any kind of measurement we use in different countries. But they don't think that in that total amount, you have to count the time you spend for researchers, and talking with professionals, with colleagues can help you to just realize that this is the real life when you have to work with it, right? Which was, I think, was what Lara was trying to stress. Real life is something different from academical life and studies and whatever. And what I was thinking about, Joanna, when you, because kind of now, I think that Lara, I think we are almost the same age. I think I don't want to be rude. I'm not going to ask you publicly your age, but I think just like me, Lara, when she started to be a translator, she kind of, when I was a student, there weren't translation courses in the university. You had to learn what in Italian we call it bottega, workshop, the real workshop. I was cited by a professional translator who taught me to do this, and that. I think that Joanna comes from another generation where, of course, as you from her CV, you can see she studied literary translation, she studied translation. Were you taught when you studied all these kind of things? I mean, were you aware when you started working as a professional of what you were going to be faced with?
That's interesting. Yeah, so my master's course, it wasn't specifically literary, but it focused on the tasks of translation and interpreting, as Lara said. So you came out and you were competent in the skills. We had one session for about a couple of hours with people sort of from the professional associations, and I still remember they said, don't undercut us, don't work for too little, but they wouldn't tell us what the price was. So yeah, so I came out lost. Then I had a job in-house in an agency, so I actually got to see the prices that people got paid while I had a fixed salary. But yeah, that was missing. I don't know about courses nowadays because it is a few years since I was at university, but I think this is where, when you have the trust with sort of a colleague who's your peer, you can actually ask. And you know, quite often British people are like, oh, I don't want to ask about money, but I think we're getting bolder. Yeah, I had a conversation with a colleague a couple of days ago, and he's like, well, I know we're very British, but can I ask you, you know, what is the rate at the minute? And I was like, yeah, I will tell you. So, but you need maybe sort of the personal contact to feel bold enough. So.
And that was the point. I mean, being part of association, taking part in surveys, in sharing information, you can also avoid being so shy about asking people, because you go on the website and you find exactly what you need to know about it, right? And one of the questions of the many that we put on the paper today, but of course we're not going to have the time to go through that, was, do we have to teach students, future translators, to talk with fellow translators? What do you think, Lara? Because I think that is something we have to teach.
Yes, obviously. I do think we need to teach them that, you know, a hermit life is not good for them. There are certain cliches that have to be dismantled, let's say, about, you know, the ivory tower, about Saint Jerome, you know, about this shy translator who should be invisible, etc., etc. I think that translators should become more vocal, more visible, more in touch with what you said, real life, but meaning actually, you know, working conditions, which is something that we simply cannot avoid. One of the things, for example, that nobody has mentioned today or even longer is the mental health or even physical health of a translator. My students usually start giggling when I show them a slide talking about working conditions. I also give them a slide where I tell them what pains and disorders are most common among translators. And what they should do to prevent it, like, you know, swimming, walking, stuff like that, or talking to other colleagues about this feeling of isolation, especially during COVID times, especially when, you know, people who work at an office or somewhere where they meet people, maybe they don't understand the difference in the way that we conduct our social life. So we work usually in isolation, and the meetings we do have professionally are usually book launches, events, literary festivals, stuff like that, which are practically have been non-existent for the past 3 years. So we have actually been robbed of a very important part of our life. As shy as you may be at these events, you know, you don't have to talk to anybody, but you still hear a lot of information and you still hear people speak about certain subjects. So I think we do need to talk to each other. I think we do need to teach the students about not only, as I said, financial working conditions or hours they're going to spend working on something. Obviously, they don't all translate, you know, very important or classical literature or something like that. Sometimes it's just a job. But still, with this job, they will also find certain problems that they will face. Usually, you know, small fees or even something else. So a group of translators can only help you solve these problems, because usually translators among themselves are very nice people. You know, they like to help other people. We are problem solvers by nature because we work with problems all the time. So when we hear of a problem, for us, it's not, you know, something to shy away from. It's something that it's our normal working day to, you know, give an answer to a problem. So I think really we shouldn't just speak about love of literature.
Yeah, and you know, in the when I was in that congress in Vienna, I was talking about just before about staging the literary translator. I was very impressed by a contribution where she took in she about the effect. She talked about the effect, or this colleague of ours, about the effect of mowing someone, the neighbors mowing the grass, the lawn, having the effect this mowing had on her output of translation, which is absolutely true, absolutely true.
And also discipline. You know, there's something that people maybe can't compare if they just work alone at home. They can't compare whether they are disciplined translators, whether their output is bigger or smaller than other people's. And I'm going to share something very interesting. It's a link in the chat to Danny's diary. It's a translation diary by Daniel Hahn, who, translating a short novel, has also written a diary about how he's doing it. And yes, great, you can show it. But copy the link, because it's I think it was 28 days or 28 maybe not consecutive days, but 28 entries about this diary. it's very interesting to see that there are days when you can translate one sentence and days which are really, going great. And you shouldn't feel embarrassed about, working on one sentence all working day, but you should also not be panicking because you haven't done more. And maybe you should be more disciplined sometimes, if you see that your output is smaller than other people's. So this is also something that you can't compare just talking to yourself.
Sure, absolutely true, absolutely. And something else I wanted to talk with you about was which is kind of Joanna, you for example, no? You're emerging translator. When you talk with more seasoned translators, is there a kind of reverence towards them which keeps you from asking kind of plaintives like this? I mean, how many pages you translate a day? Because you think that you translate too few pages, confronting it with a more professional, more seasoned translator. Because I think that being an association because I think that you decided to put on the emerging translator network just because one of the issues we have to say our students meet is that it's hard to enter the professional world, and sometimes it's also hard to enter an association because sometimes a literary association have kind of degrees of level of entry, right? So in some association you can enter only if you have already published some books. So it's a kind of a circle, that a closed circle, where you cannot get that there if you haven't translated. But if you're not there, you cannot get the information you need, news. Okay. So
yeah,
I think that. Oh, sorry.
No, that's one of the very nice things, because in the UK you've had these summer schools which are a lot less formal than a university context, and you do mingle with when they were in person, you could sit and have dinner. It would spontaneously happen with more experienced people and listening to conversations. And then also with the Emerging Translators Network, because there are the links with the TA, they'll say so many people you can have a reduction if you use this code, so it makes it cheaper. And I went to one nice event a few years ago before the London Book Fair, it was the day before, and they also said, and if you're an emerging translator, come, and you can have a little sticker so you can discreetly spot each other because you wouldn't have seen each other, and then you're at least in conversation, and then your conversations will grow bigger with other people. So it's even that icebreaker of just, it's okay, we know there'll be 20 of us there, so we'll wear the badge, and then at least you speak to one person, and maybe you see someone you met at a summer school and they might already know someone more experienced. So definitely the talking and finding gentle ways of encouraging even the shyest person to, they can come late and sit at the back and listen, and then hopefully someone, if they picked up the badge, then someone might go and say hello. So it's it is very useful. And then for me, one of the most useful things of networking, which we don't like to call networking, is to have 2 or 3 translators who are good friends, and we share work with each other, and we're quite harsh. So that meant when I first, got my first job, and then you have an editor, someone you don't know, you have no idea what their approach is. When they make comments, I mean, you've already done that in a safe space, and you know that your friends see things. So when a stranger does it, it doesn't feel as shocking, So that's the important thing I think I wanted to say as well about talking to people. And then you just gradually, the more you're at different events, the more that you see people, either online or in person, it helps. You build that confidence.
That last point is very interesting, because what sometimes I find myself to have to teach my students about reviewing. When your work is reviewed by a peer, which is reviewing, when you get your work reviewed by an editor, by a publisher, is something different from a work review, the translation review for grading at university.
Mhm.
It can be a blood covered page, but it doesn't mean that your translation is not good.
Mhm.
Okay, why if it's a blood covered page for a grading, it's not good anyway. And
Mhm.
so that's a really good point. I mean, learning how to face the harshness of the comment on your work and setting those comments in a different area. I mean, it's not for grading, it's not even, it's just for working. It's a colleague telling you you can improve your work doing this. I'm not judging you, I'm just helping you, which is really. And about dismantling myth and legends, as Lara put it, it was very interesting. Last year, I took part in the, I think it's Petra Literary Translation Studies Conference held in Dublin by the Trinity Center for Literary and Cultural Translation. And there was this contribution by Paola Ruffo about the self-perception of the translator. Sometimes the translator kind of like to be seen like the I would say the one who lives in the ivory tower. He doesn't want to be taken away from that ivory tower, but that's a soft spot, because in that way the publisher, and not sometimes they don't want to pay him for what he really deserves, can use this. I mean, you do a job which is very how you say
Solitary,
rewarding for itself. So just be happy for what we do. There's a comment by Bryn Roberts. Duncan Petra, he health self-care competence. The momentum is building. So I think the shift is going on. I mean, now we're passing from the translating studies to translator studies, which is, I think, the right golden medium Lara was talking about, trying this medium about. And Laura is sharing another link. I'm going to always from the companion.
Yes, I wanted to just mention it. It's a project that we did in the Croatian Literary Translators Association, where we had the feeling, especially during pandemic times, that our retired translators, who are still very active, but they're just, you know, retired, that their status, their tax status is that they're retired. You know, they don't, you can't really meet them anywhere anymore, because they're, you know, all of us, we've been spending time at home, and usually you could meet them at literary events. I think you're showing the wrong screen.
Sorry.
The thing is that we encouraged young emerging translators who are already member of our association, but we have a low threshold. We accept people who have published one book if it's good. These are people who are under 30, who were doing interviews with retired members about how it used to be, how it's today, what their output is, what they're working on, what do they think about young translators today, you know, all sorts of questions that cropped up in the conversation. And these are interviews that can be read in our webpage. They're obviously all in Croatian, but maybe some of you know some Slavic language and can go through the main idea. But I think that, you know, this is also something that you cannot do on your own. This is, this happens to be my husband and my daughter, but that's this is how they translate it together. She is now also a literary translator, so maybe, you know, she got the bug here. Bosilka Brlecic has just been awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award. You know, these are really very, very important translators into Croatian. And for a young translator, especially somebody who has read their translations as a student or as a child, it's an honor to be meeting them and to talk to them. So they were quite excited about it. And I think that, you know, this intergenerational discussion should also take place.
Also because you understand that a translator that maybe you read as the greatest translator of your country is just a professional like you, or the one you want to be. It's a human person with issues that you have, and for a young translator can be kind of, oh, I can get there. It's not something that I cannot get to. Okay, and Joanna was mentioning about mentoring, right? Mm-hmm. Which is another aspect in which associations are really important, because of course you cannot go and knock at the door of a translator and ask, can you mentor me? But most literary translator association do. For example, in Italy we got Strade, which is the Sindacato Traduttori. They have mentoring programs, which are really important, because of course sometimes the student gets out from the school and say, now where do I start from? I cannot go and boss the translator I think I want to be. But through mentoring, how did you get your mentoring, Joanna? Because you said you were mentored by.
I've been to some of the summer schools, and then it's more peer mentoring. But one of the nice things we were able to do just a few months ago was invite Anam and Georgia, who had been mentored at the National Centre of Writing, to come and chat to us. And very naturally, they told us how they applied. Because even if you read a short interview, you still think, well, that person must be super smart. They must have had a fantastic project. But it's when you actually hear them talk, and that I think encouraged more people to apply, even if maybe you thought you were near the deadline. So and to know that their experience with the more seasoned translator was one that worked well, that they weren't these very eminent people, that they had been approachable. So even just hearing from your own peers about being mentored, that was, I think that's encouraged more people to apply. So it's this combination of sort of text and interviews on the internet, and then just the chance to hear people in real life, I think,
sure,
is valuable.
And for example, the Seattle Companion, the page, you can find there all the mentoring programs mm-hmm. and plans that we all through Europe. Because sometimes you don't understand that you don't know where there are some countries where mentoring is much evolved than others, and then you can try to apply there. Oh, you can propose your association, which happens, for example, for our association. Mm-hmm. Why don't we start a mentoring program as well? So being part of an association is also finding new ways of helping because sometimes something that was really funny when we were talking about before we met the first time before this panel, she said it's quite common that translators do go to the association only when problem arise. But it should be the other way around. That should apply to an association in order to be ready to face problems when they arise, which should be the other way around. And that's why it should be so important to join an association.
Well, this is a way that you can recruit members. You know, when somebody comes to the office and says, oh God, I have this problem, our office manager, she always kindly connects these people to somebody who can help them. And then of course the next sentence is, why don't you join our association? And we will help you then also, but we also help non-members. So everybody who has a problem with a contract or with some, you know, misinformation or something, we try to help and remedy the situation. But we always use it also as an opportunity to explain why this would be good for them to join. Because in Croatia, for example, you also have a tax deduction if you are, you know, sort of registered as an artist in this artistic association. So it's a very important point, that we can make. But also we had seminars on tax law in Croatia. So there are like 4 or 5 categories that you can be in. How can you know? And if you're 24, you've just finished your university, you're starting, one parent tells you, you know, establish a firm. The other parent tells you, no, 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 why don't you go freelance? The third person tells you, oh, no, you should start working at a school. How really can you know what's best for you?
Initially, it's the other way around. You have the tax deduction if you publish a book, but you don't have to be enrolled in any association. But students don't know that. So when they get out and they start translating, they offered contract without that deduction, and they accept it because they don't know it's a copyright tax system plan. So that's the other way around, exactly. And I think we should go to, we are toward the end of our conversation, more or less, because if there are questions, we have the time for questions. And I kind of wanted to share, it's once again a kind of a resume. I'm sorry that it's in Italian, but I think it's nice to, because what I show my students when I teach them about how to face the professional life. And let me see if I can show this. Okay. Can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
That's the final slide, which of course, it's exactly what we talked about today. Knowing the industry you're working for, knowing how this industry works, of course, knowing the professional relationship that you can build, being visible, just like what Lara said, translators are not invisible. When Loris Venuti was talking about another kind of invisibility, it's not the invisibility they're trying to sell us, no? How to make a proposal for translation is something sometimes students don't know who to contact, where to send an email. They just send it to @info. whatever, and of course they go in the bin. So how to find new collaboration, because I think nowadays what has to be taught also to the student is to diversify the work. Nowadays you cannot just be a literary translator, unfortunately. You have to be an AVT translator, you have to be an interpreter, you have to kind of diversify your input, your income input. How to build a net, of course, so professional and friendship net. How, and that's what Lara was saying, how to know how to be able to pitch with editor, how to be able to negotiating your contract. It doesn't mean that an editor, a publisher gives you a contract, offers you a contract is the best contract ever. An association can help you to confront contracts and say, okay, it's not a proper contract. I better try to contract it. What Lara was saying, organizing your job, your work. I mean, meeting the deadlines, and then knowing the fiscal system and what can help you being kind of guarded by from problems arising from not knowing your fiscal system. Okay, I think, do you want to add something else? I mean,
no, I'm looking at your slide and thinking it looks like a translation of my slide into Italian.
Yeah, of course
that I have for my students when I show them what they should, what the skills sort of are that they should master, and then they look a little bit disappointedly at this screen and say, where is love of literature and content, and an actual practical translation and stuff. I said, yeah, you're getting there, but just, remember this. And the only thing that really have to repeat after every lesson is I ask them, when is the time that you have to sign a contract? And they have to answer in advance.
Okay. Absolutely. There is a question from Paola Mollica. What do you think about showing students of literary translation courses the multiple possible fields they can train and use their translation and linguistic skills other than literary translation? I'm thinking about audiovisual translation, of course, or teaching or tutoring. Could it be confusing to them, or is it a more realistic approach to the professional world?
It's not only a more realistic approach, it's also that audiovisual translation is very, very close to literary translation. It's also, you know, a balancing of the visual and the textual of various cultural aspects that you have to translate, etc. But I think that actually many studies offer audiovisual translation as a course. Where they might even not have literary translation, because, you know, literary translation cannot be so quantified, or I don't know how to say it more, you know, I think that audiovisual translation has a technical part to it, which can be taught more easily maybe than literary translation. Literary translation is maybe more fluid, and it's difficult to find somebody who could really give a short course, because it's usually, you know, half a year or a semester or whatever you call it at your universities. Yeah, but I think every aspect of translation should be at least mentioned.
Yeah, and I think it's not confusing. It's kind of opening new horizons, something that maybe the student didn't think of. For example, you can use your literary skills, your translator skills, also for working in a redaction as a reviewer, as a redactor. You don't have to be a translator, but well, it would kind of should be wished to have a translator working as a editor, a redactor when reviewing a translator, which are pure editor in redaction. And for example, once again, here comes in the difference between countries, among countries. For example, in Italy, the audiovisual translator is not a kind of a professional figure. So and usually because we are more a dubbing country, of course, than a subtitle country. And so there is the dialogist, which takes your work and put it in. So in Italy, for example, if you work for AVT, a literary translator can work for AVT, but there is no, it's not kind of a legal, I would say, there is no contract about that. It's just the dialogist has to take a translator and ask him to translate for him.
As opposed to Croatia, if we're comparing countries, where the audiovisual translators have an association, which is a so-called professional and artistic association. They also have the tax deduction. They are actually they have an equal status as we have, the literary translators. We collaborate very closely in various fields, like, for example, authors' rights and copyright law, things like that, and the tax categories. So we organize seminars together, etc. So it really depends on the country.
Sure. And another point I wanted to stress with you about being part of an association, maybe it's not the case for the Imagine Translators, because the Imagine Translators Network is not an kind of Yulara said, I asked the other day, Joanna, if they were kind of what kind of association they can sorry,
not formally established, or
they're not formally
recognized
established,
entity.
but for example, literary translator, I think in Croatia as well, one point went to one useful part of being a part of a literary translator is for the ongoing education. I mean, Literary Translation Association offer courses, workshops that cost much, much less than what they would cost if you go outside, which is a very important, because another point for which the student has to be made aware of, that you never stop studying when you are translating. You have to always, you cannot stop. studying and evolving as a translator. You never arrive to a point where you say, okay, I'm the best translator ever. Of course, no one of us think of it, but still. Teresa Ciuffoletti, thanks a lot for the interesting talk. I am a translating IT BDU member, an occasional translation teacher, and a lot of things you said resonated with me. Looking at a survey on the legal situation of the literary translators in Europe, I see that Italy doesn't do very well with respect to royalties and extra remuneration for secondary uses. What can we do collectively to change the situation? Showing average rates is great, but when even average rates are often too low, especially depending on how expensive life is in your country, the country you live in, which is true. Lara says something, it's an abusive relationship, of course. In real life, you have divorce, but in professional life, you cannot divorce from your publisher. What else to say, Lara? Because
well, I think that part of the survey is also, you know, it does reflect living conditions in a country. So if you look at the complete survey, you will see that people have commented on this situation, but of course you can collectively work on it. You cannot individually, but if you join an association, if you show your governments that your association actually represents a critical number of people in a process, you know, because the book chain is long, and there are many translators in this book chain, so maybe you could show that you represent so and so many workers. You have to use the word workers, not artists, and you know, it sounds very romantic. No, they're workers, people. You know, you can compare this this number to, for example, the number in the, well, not in Italy, the automobile industry, but for example, we compared it to the shipbuilding industry, and we got you know, I mean, the whole book chain. The whole book chain is actually this more people than the shipbuilding industry, which is very important in Croatian for political reasons also. So, you know, if you compare it to something that politicians can, you know, compute in their heads, that this is an important group, maybe you can get further. And you in Italy, you really have associations who are active and strong, and I think everybody should join them. Yeah, actually,
thank you for that, because, for example, in Italy, this year, for the first time ever in Italian history, translator association were invited to a table for a new law on the book industry. It was the first time ever. And I was one of the representatives for Haiti. And of course, the first thing they asked us, they asked, how many are you? And we couldn't answer, because we say, maybe we are 1,700, maybe we are more. But it's because not all the translators join association. And if I cannot rely on that base of numbers, I cannot kind of contract with other parts of the book chain you're saying, because of course on that same table editors will say, but we have more sharing in this amount of money, why you translator you want that? And it was quite a very hard school anyway, but it was very interesting for the first time ever. So join association anyway. There is a question from, I'm sorry, I cannot read it. I'm sorry if I read it bad, but I think it's
Gülsüm, I think.
Yeah. And I think for Joanna is a good question. Do you think it is a better idea for an emerging translator to work on a source text which doesn't exist in the target literature? Can an emerging translator have a chance with the translation of a literary text which has already been translated by renowned translators?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yes.
So I don't know which market you will be working in, but for translators working into English, not that many writers have been translated. So the general recommendation is start with someone who's never been published in English, and that gives you an in with the publisher, and to start with a very short extract and try and send that out. I mean, we have seen big retranslations recently. Emily Wilson's The Odyssey, and I think Susan Bernofsky's retranslating some of the big German classics, because, you know, after 100 years or so or more for The Odyssey, perspectives change, the styles, the approaches. But for an emerging translator, I mean, if there was some classic and it has been a long time and you wanted to do an extract and you wanted to, you've highlighted maybe problems with some of the things that have been trans. I think certainly, yeah, there are a lot of translations that were done in English quite a long time ago that I think people would really question now. So if there's something like that and you're working into English, that could be very interesting. You know, perhaps if the renowned translator is already dead, then that's a safer one, perhaps. But I can't really, I haven't looked into that sort of thing myself, because working into English, you know, we've so much fresh material that no one's read in English yet. But they're definitely, but maybe the publishers themselves will have to decide to pick up an old classic. I think there is interest maybe in certainly retranslating English classics in some cases.
Well, there is also an economical interest for a publisher, because sometimes the classic is out of rights, and so they don't have to pay the translation rights. And if, in fact, in Italy, there are a lot of classical books being retranslated, and especially by young translators, of course. And the point that with Joanna kind of highlighted was exactly, for example, for the Italian market, but I know also for the Croatian market, we translate a lot. Kind of most of our published books are translated, so the material there is a lot, a big request. The problem is how to get into that kind of a market, and maybe retranslating a classic, proposing to retranslate a classic, telling the publisher, I found in the whole translation by a renowned translator, but the style should be refreshed, or there are some points which back then 80 years ago that there was not internet, so there are mistakes that can kind of find easily correcting. So it could be a good point to just propose and publish a retranslation saying, I found this soft spot in the old translation. What about you, Lara? What is your advice?
Well, I was just thinking there are 3 points I wanted to make. First, that this question shows that it's very important for a translator to be aware of their own market, to see whether this is something that is usual in the market, to have retranslations. For example, Croatian is a rather small market, so retranslations maybe happen every 50 years, which is, you know, a very long period of time. And I'm not sure it's going, you know, you would have a chance with something that the publisher himself or herself hasn't already thought about. The second thing is that a little story about some 15-20 years ago, there was this, the Minister of Culture of Croatia had this idea to publish, you know, big classics to fill some holes. Some things went out of print, some, you know, just disappeared, some were not translated. So professors were called together to give a list of every language, what is still considered a classic, maybe refresh it with some, you know, female names and stuff like that, and to analyze the translations that have already that have been I mean that were available at the time. And it turned out that many of these translations actually needed a retranslation. So yes, old translation can be, you know, not complete, or there were some cases where it was more retelling of the novel than an actual translation, etc.
Or translated from a pivot language. It was quite common in publishing.
Yes. So it's, you know, it's there are various problems with old translations, but what I always tell my students at the workshop, that they should take an old translation that they can trust, that they loved, for example, and thought it was a good translation. They should take the original, try to translate several pages, and then compare it just to this old translation and see where they have made a mistake, where the other text is more beautiful, or like it's a very good exercise if you know which translators to trust. If you know that something is a established classic and respected, this is a very good exercise for you to just retranslate certain parts and compare it with the old translation, and you will learn a lot from it.
Sure. And a very good point Lara made also is knowing your market. I think something which has to be taught to students is also how to use book fairs. Mm-hmm. You see students in Italian book fairs, but I see it is also in London. Students, translators, they go around handling their CVs to everyone. It doesn't work. It's not useful. Book fairs should be used to get to know the market, which are the trends. Participating into, for example, I'll share you another slide that I usually show to my students, and when I show it, they all kind of are with a gaping mouth. It's surveys or book fair surveys help you to know which are the most translated titles, with genres. Sorry, it's unaware. Anyway, and from that you can choose which kind of publisher to contact, because maybe it's something you're more keen on translating, or it's matching your course, right? There is a question by Manisha, but I don't think I fully understood it.
No, maybe me neither.
Due to copyright issues, it is advisable for new translators to work with writers who are in the public domain. What do you mean, Manisha? Can you elaborate better your question? Because what do you mean in the public domain? They're not published, or they're still to be published?
No, the public domain is when the copyright has expired, which means that it's already 75 years, mostly 75 years since the author's death. So we can't really work with the writers unless we do a seance. But I think that it's the question is actually whether we should work with the texts, with these texts. I don't think that copyright law in any way is different, for our rights. It's just a text from the public domain. We don't have to take into consideration whether the author still has the rights. And also it's the publisher's responsibility. But your copyright is guaranteed by your contract. So, and by your law, nobody can take away your author's rights, So, yeah, I don't see a problem here.
I think maybe if I read the question following on from the first one about the emerging translator, so maybe the emerging translator who hasn't been hired but is working on a little project to build up their portfolio, so very short text that you're doing, hoping someone will publish. From my experience, actually, I think obviously because we're working into English, people haven't been translated into English. It's much more useful perhaps to reach out to someone who, is still under copyright in their country, to reach out to that publisher, because it's just a way of opening a conversation. And you might ask, so what I've done, and it's been very successful, especially with German publishers, big French publishers, their foreign rights people write back very quickly saying, yes, the English rights are available, but double check with us if you actually want to get it published. And the online magazine will want to get extra confirmation usually from the publisher, because it might have taken you a year. So for me, I would say actually, if this is just one of your sort of pet projects where you're trying to build a portfolio, meet publishers, go for ones, where the rights haven't been sold into your language yet, because then you can get into a conversation. And on that point as well, sometimes people write to the author and the author's like, yeah, that's fine, go for it. But the author doesn't always know if the rights for your language are available. And sometimes it's happened, people have discovered the publisher has sold the rights, the book will be published, it's not public knowledge yet. So that was a bit of a wasted project, because they're not going to publish an unknown translator's extract somewhere before the main one comes. But I would say if they're under copyright, it's a chance to speak to a publisher who may then get in touch with you later if they want a sample. I mean, into English, it's different, you know, we'll be asked to translate into English so they can sell it for the Chinese market or sell it for other markets. But you don't be afraid to write to a publisher. But Leonardo, he pointed out something important. You don't necessarily know which address to write to. So I have written to some very general ones. I think I never got an answer. And then you do need to dig maybe to find the name, probably look up LinkedIn or something, or
go to the fairs and
go to the fairs and know
people
who to write to.
in person. And yeah,
exactly.
There's one just little point I wanted to make before we say goodbye, which is we should also look at all these mentorship programs and association buildings and talks with colleagues in the other direction, that we seasoned translators, and Leonardo, I have to tell you, I'm older than you, and it's public knowledge when was my year of birth is public knowledge. So when I talk to young emerging translators, not only do I learn that there are different things that are more important to them in the professional life, that make me rethink the way I present. It's basically, we always find the common ground, but the way I present the material at the workshop changes with every generation, because I see that their way of thinking is different, their interests are different, the way they were taught is different. But also I learn language. That's also something that should make you get out of your ivory tower, you know, that meeting other people makes you realize that your language has changed, that you have to learn the language of the newer generations or people from other parts of the country. So, you know, don't always look into this from young to old. You should also look from old to young.
There was when I talked about ongoing education, it's also that. Yes. I mean, you have to refresh your language. You have to kind of wash your clothes in the streams that goes. It's not. It's a river that doesn't.
So it's not only about networking in this political or activist idea, but it's just, you know, talking, you know, finding out new things.
And about scouting, join an association, meeting with colleagues, fellows, and it's also maybe asking colleagues, I mean to send my scouting proposal to this publisher. Do you think they would accept it? It's a good publisher. They pay equally. Do they meet their contract? I mean, I think that, which is important. Don't be shy to ask.
We have a question by Anya Pravuljac, which says, what are the conditions for joining Translators Association? CEATL cannot be joined individually because CEATL is an umbrella association of associations. You can become individual member of your country's association. I'm guessing, Anya, you are somewhere from, I don't know, Croatia, Slovenia, Serbia, somewhere, judging by your name, maybe not. Bosnia. You used to have a translators, I mean a literary translators association, but I think that your association now gathers all translation, you know, systems. So I don't know whether you can join the Bosnian association, but you can obviously become part of this more, I mean, less formal ETN. I'm guessing, Johanna, yes? Yeah. Yeah. But what I wanted to stress, that there are countries in Europe that we haven't been able to, you know, invite to join CEATL, exactly because they don't have an association, and we can only take associations. So Anya, if you can sort of talk to your colleagues and you want to establish an association, CEATL is here to help, and the companion is the right thing for you. You should really look into the CEATL companion for Literary Translators Association getting started. That's the first button. So if you need help please contact me. My email is everywhere, so you can find it in Društvo hrvatskih književnih prevodilaca page. So please write.
And that's a good advice from Maka, I think Maka, yes, sure. That from my experience, one can afford it. It's quite good to join Literary Translator Association from your country, but also from the original language you translate from. I found it quite useful, which is quite true. I mean, but still quite expensive, because sometimes, for example, ATA, USA ATA is quite expensive to join that translator working from English from my side, for example. I think our time is over. And well, we kind of hit a lot of, highlighted a lot of points, which I hope can be useful for the students of the summer school and for the other attendees. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, Lara. And I'm going to check what time when we were born.
Thank the ESLT for inviting us. I mean, it's really been a pleasure. It would have been nicer to meet in person, obviously, but let's hope we will one day.
Thank you, Joanna.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And Lucia, I think that you're going to close the panel. Thank you, guys. Bye.